Hello everyone, welcome to PHTV Channel 4 in Palos Heights. I'm Sue Jankowski. Today's show is Spotlight Issues, exploring today's topics, specifically education on the front lines and in the classroom. I think we're all thinking about teachers. We've heard so much about schools, what's going on. Is our schools in, our schools out? What's remote learning? What's happening with that? And we're so lucky today to have George Fear, who is an English teacher at Consolidated District 230, Carl Sandburg High School, my alma mater. So, I was familiar with it at one point. George, thanks for coming in today and talking to us.
Thanks for having me, Sue.
It's great.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm really anxious to talk to somebody who's kind of right there with education right now. But before we get started on that, let's talk a little bit about your background. Where did you originate from? How'd you get involved in education, specifically over at Sandburg?
So I'm local. I graduated from Independence Junior High. I'm a 128 alum. Then I went on to Marist and Millikan University.
Oh, wow.
So I majored in secondary education English at Millikan, and then I was hired in District 230 right out of college.
And so you've been there for
14 years.
14 years, your whole career.
Correct.
Okay. Well, you're probably never in a million years could have predicted this type of switch in the way education has turned. So let's start right at the very beginning. When this was all kind of starting to bubble up and we're getting concerned, and all of a sudden it's really affecting the way we live our lives, and specifically education for you and millions of students.
No doubt.
So what was that like at school when this first kind of started? I mean, there had to be a lot of rumors and what are we going to do, and how did that all feel, and what did you do at that time?
Yeah, so March 13th, we received information that we were going to be shut down. It looked like it was going to be an extended spring break. Class was going to run remote, but it seemed like there was talk that we'd be back. And then obviously, it kept getting pushed back until we ended the school year, in May, and we were virtual that entire time. And then as far as this year, we received probably the end of July the actual plan for our remote start, and then our, the beginning of phase 2, which is our in-person instruction.
Okay, so when this first began, March 13th, and it was like an extended spring break, and I have actually grandchildren who did the same thing. Oh, we're going to just have a break, then we'll take spring break, and then we'll kind of go back. And when that didn't happen, here's all the teachers, but needing to educate all the students at home. Mm-hmm. How did that work? I mean, just trying to get the logistics of getting kids on a remote learning device and all the teachers getting the things that they need to be able to teach.
It was challenging. We had, our plan was pretty solid after we knew we were going to be remote. So after that spring break, the district came up with a pretty solid plan. We kind of had a Tuesday, Thursday schedule or a Monday, Wednesday schedule where we were having, kids were logging in at that time for those classes. That was helpful. That worked. My attendance in May and April was not great, especially with my sophomores. My seniors, they kind of held on a little bit longer because they wanted that last high school experience, mm-hmm. I felt like. But once sophomores realized their grades weren't going to move, they were done. Many of them checked out, and I think that was probably a necessary decision by Illinois State Board of Ed, but it was a little bit costly for sure.
Yeah. Seniors kind of hung in there because it's their senior year. But, we saw a million no graduations, no proms, no last basketball game or whatever. How was that feeling at school at that time?
It was tough. I coached baseball at Sandburg, so our senior baseball players didn't get to play their season. They lost out on opportunities being recruited by some colleges. Yeah. And just those accolades that come along with being able to play your senior year. We had a few guys that had been on varsity since they were sophomores. They were kind of looking to have that kind of breakout season their senior year, and they didn't get to experience that. And I think a lot of that is why I felt so connected to that and those kids. I felt like maybe that's why my seniors hung on a little bit longer, because I felt like a lot of our conversations during our Zoom meetings were, a little bit of trying to counsel them through some of this. What was challenging for them.
Yeah. And I think when kids are in the more upper grades, high school specifically, having that remote experience really is a huge disconnect between you, your peers, your teachers. You don't have someone kind of nudging you along. That's, I would think, explains some of the lack of attendance.
For sure, that high school experience, I mean, so much of the high school experience is happening with, in between classes, and during lunch,
Right.
those side conversations that you're having with your teachers or your peers on your way to your next class. I mean, so much of the experience is there. You think about Sandburg's a big school, so our passing periods are 7 minutes long. I mean, that's 56 minutes of the day where you're moving from class to class, but it's not just transportation. They're talking, they're interacting, they're staying after class to talk with the teacher, or they're showing up to class early to talk with the teacher, or the interactions that are just occurring with teachers and students in the hallways. It's that experience was gone. So some of the challenges that could be addressed in 2 minutes with, all right, this kid didn't do this thing, and I got to make sure I talk to this kid, or I know this kid might have had a rough night because such and such is going on in the family. I want to make sure I can connect with this kid. Became really tough on teachers to try to make those connections during
Right.
the remote setting. So you're sending a bunch of emails a day as opposed to being able to have that in-person contact, and then you're hoping that the kid sees the email, you're hoping that the kid's reading the email, you're hoping, so all of those challenges were
part of it too.
For sure.
And just getting the schoolwork in, or as you're speaking to your class, I just think it would be hard to get everyone's attention in that format.
Yes, it's really challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, so as we move into what's going on now, District 230 has gone to their phase-in plan where students are now in the building. So you have an A through D schedule. So if you're on A, then you come in on Mondays, and Tuesdays is B, and so on. So Wednesdays, everybody's fully remote. And so the A cohort that was in there today, one of my classes had 4 students in person, and then everybody else was coming in on a Google Meet. So it's challenging.
Wait a minute. So they can now still choose. I don't want to go into the physical school.
Correct.
So you had 4 kids out of 25% of the students that are
Right.
able to go. Only 4 of them at that particular class were in, and the
Yes.
rest were still remote.
Right. So that was the A cohort
Yeah.
today. So the Monday cohort. My first period class had 4 students live in person, and then I had 21 that were home.
Okay, now, how is it, I just can't imagine the nightmare, talking to the Zoom, remote, Google, whatever they're on, and then having students in the room trying to address both groups. It's got to be tough.
It's been challenging,
Yeah.
for sure. So I've arranged my class where I'm kind of at the podium that's off to the side, and that's where my laptop is. So I'm in front of the laptop with the students projected on the board, so the students that are in class can see the projection of the students, and then I'm off to the side, and I can see the projection of the kids, and I can see the actual live humans that are in front of me.
Okay.
So that's been my plan so far.
Okay.
Of what I've come
Now,
up with.
because teaching is doing things that are good or best for the students based on that particular class. So since you have 2 different kinds of groups, you might not be getting in the work. You might be able to have to do it. I can't imagine. Are you meeting together as groups of teachers to try and address some of these difficulties that you'd be having?
Yes, so quite a bit. That's a lot of the conversations we're having, and a lot of them is kind of discussing how it's not going great, or ways that we could improve the general instruction. Or, I mean, District 230 had 30% of the kids chose full remote, so they're not coming. So those kids that are coming in person, they're craving that in-person class experience.
Right.
We got to give it to them.
Yeah.
So trying to figure out how that's going to work and what that's going to look like it's been tough. So one strategy that I've developed with a couple of other teachers is we're trying, at least in the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes, to make sure that, okay, The group at home, they have their task or their whatever they're working on to start class or whatever they're working on to finish class. We're going to close down, and then you can have that, that conversation and just the check-in with those students that are in front of you.
Well, that goes. It gives you an opportunity. And are they able to? I mean, I know they're socially distancing in the room. They're wearing a mask and so on. But are they able to then have a little conversation with each other? Because they're not really passing in a hall the same way either.
No, they're not. So the hallways are arranged as it's like driving in the city. It's like one-way hallways. You've got one staircase is up, the other one's down. So it's not the kind of free-for-all of a normal high school experience of the passing period. So that's something that I tried my best for the student, and this is only, we're going on week 2 of kids being in class. So I try my best to make sure that their screens are off, so their laptops are down, so they can look up what's being projected on the screen. And then if we have a moment where, okay, students at home are doing a reading, kids in class could be using this time to do the reading, but we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about what's going on in class, or just what's going on in their lives, or just reflect on, hey, so how is it having a assigned seat at lunch? Like how is that going for you? And trying to check in that way. So. And
aren't you kind of eating by yourself? Is kind of what I'm understanding.
Yeah, they're spaced out in our gyms.
Yeah. It's a real social time, so you're not getting that either.
I know.
So you're really not getting much social, except for the small opportunities you might have in your rooms with the very few people that are there. So how would you say how are they doing that way? I mean, educationally is challenging, but emotionally and socially, that's got to be very challenging. Are they really feeling? I feel it kind of comes in waves. I mean, sometimes I feel like kind of overwhelmed and really depressed. And I'm an adult who can kind of see my way through these things. But being a teen, it's got to be really rough.
Yeah, I worry about them.
Yeah.
I think educationally, I think my courses, I think teaching English, I don't think is as overwhelming necessarily for them. I think they can do the reading on their own. They'd be doing that reading on their own, in a traditional setting. Mm-hmm. The guidance that they need for the writing, we can do those mini lessons in our writing assignments, and then they can start working, and they can pop into the Google Meet and ask those questions, and they can get some one-on-one. But I mean, in a math class, you ask a math question, that could be 15 minutes of a 39-minute period. I mean, it's difficult. It's maybe the first time in my life where I feel a lot of sympathy for the math teachers. But it's a really that is really hard. That is a really challenging class to teach. And kids are almost afraid to ask questions because they know they're going to get eye rolls from the rest of their the 10 that know what they're doing are going to give the eye rolls to the kid that doesn't know what he's doing because they're holding up the instruction.
Gosh, I didn't really think about that. And you're right. I mean, the social.
Right?
Yeah, of that, asking the wrong question or a stupid question, which there are no stupid questions, but tell a kid that, and they do feel stupid anyway.
And it's just the way a math class would work is you might have kids working on a problem on the board, and then kids are working at their desks, and the teacher's circulating, and they're kind of able to check in. I mean, just in a traditional math setting, and that is, I have no idea what that can look like.
To do that.
It's really, that part of it's really challenging. Where the challenge that we have in English is the feedback on their writing and trying to constantly give that feedback. That's definitely the challenge we have. And it's even more challenging now because you can't get that class-wide feedback like you normally would. Where I could take 5 minutes, throw up a sample essay of a student, and we look at the good, the bad, what we can change, what's going on, that's great here, and we can kind of do that together, and they can follow along with that. In the Google Meet setting, it's just not.
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
No, you try.
They're just not interacting with it the same way.
No. So you were mentioned that attendance after spring break and as time went on, kind of fell off. How's attendance, the remote attendance at this point?
It's been good.
Oh, it is good.
It has. Yeah, okay. I've been really pleased with it. The attendance has been good. Now we've had certain students are having some issues with there's technology issues, right? Wi-Fi slow, or there's a lag. Some are having, where their cameras are off, but they're listening in, but their cameras are off. And that could be a million reasons for that, right? So some of them are working right next to their sibling, and they're trying to help their younger sibling, and right? So there's some are embarrassed by, could be the home situation, whatever is going on. So that definitely presents a challenge and is a little bit tricky. And right now I have a student teacher as well, so you can imagine
Wow,
what she's going
She's
through.
really learning a lot.
She's learning a ton, and she is
Yeah.
phenomenal. She's doing a wonderful job. Irina Karopoulos, she's doing really well. But that's definitely been her real challenge. Like, she's like, okay, I want to see this kid. I need to know this student, and their camera's been off 90% of the time.
Oh.
Even if you call on them, they'll answer.
But they won't turn the camera on.
Camera's off.
Okay,
Yeah.
and there's no requirement to,
It's tough to mandate,
Yeah.
It's like funny because the kids are wired to kind of follow the rules, right? For the most part, as best as high school kids are gonna, right? So, the beginning of the semester, the kids were like, "Oh, Mr. Fear, can I go to the bathroom?" And I'm like, "You're in your house. What am I going to like?" I mean, if I say no, what are you going to do? I mean, am I going to be like, "No, chained to the desk"? Like, of course not, right? So it's just an interesting.
It's just fun.
It is.
Funny.
It
Yeah.
is. But
Okay, so the other important part of this is parents. And now with your high schooler, the parents can still go to work because, those kids can stay at
right.
home. But I know there's kind of the group of parents who really wants their kids to go to school no matter what, and there's the group that they're not going to be going to school until who knows when. So what kind of support are you getting, or what kind of concerns do they have, or what's your feedback with all of that?
I think there's probably a lot of chatter in the community that I've been able to be distant from. I think administration is hearing a lot of it. I'm not getting any emails. It's the same correspondence I would always have with parents. If students struggling with something, or if I'm noticing something, then we're gonna have a conversation about it. Same way with parents reaching out to me. But I haven't gotten any praise, and I haven't gotten any criticism
that's
at this
good.
point.
Yeah.
Parent-teacher conferences are coming up next week, so that might be the first time to really have some conversations. It's going to be really challenging, parent-teacher conferences for sure, because I feel like now all I can give them is a snapshot of what they already know, which is what their child's grade is, and then I can talk to them through the rest of the semester. They have 24-hour access to their grades. I feel like in a traditional setting during parent-teacher conferences, I get that opportunity to voice any real concerns that I have, or if I don't have concerns, some of those just share anecdote with connection that I have with their kid. Mm-hmm. And I don't have those connections because the periods are so short, and it's like by the time everybody gets logged in, and we're going, and you just feel this press to get content because we've got a 39-minute period that we're trying to cram content into.
Now,
so
is that period of time reduced due to the mobility needed in the building?
So when we were fully remote, the schedule they built for the full remote model is the same schedule that they're maintaining. And I think that's what the district liked about the plan, that there's not going to be a scheduling change for the kids, that we can do this hybrid model with the A through D cohorts, and the schedule will be built out and will remain the same. So you have 39 to 42-minute classes, kind of depending on the period, because there's lunch periods. Those are typically a little bit longer, and then it's 5-minute passing periods. So the kids get 5 minutes at home in between each class, which is, when you think about it conceptually, you're like, okay, yeah, a 5-minute break. That seems like that makes sense. It's really short.
Yeah,
it's really short.
Yeah.
So that I think kids are frustrated with that. And they're like, okay, so I get done with math, and now I'm going to English, and I've got to get onto this meet. I got to log in. I got to get my stuff out, and I got to get ready for that class, and I got to get the workout. And it's quick. It's a press for them, and those are the kids that are probably doing really well, mm-hmm. and they're feeling that pressure.
Yeah. Well, it's not at all like I'm meandering out of my classroom down the hall, saying hi to people and talking or whatever, having some conversation,
right, leisurely.
And sitting there in the same spot getting ready for the next class is just entirely different. It's
totally
like a regular
different.
work day for them, which is, there needs to be a social component to school.
Right, and I think just the sheer movement is good for them.
Yeah.
To be able to get up and walk to their next class. There's just kind of, and there's also, all right, I'm frustrated in English, now I'm getting up and I'm leaving to a new space in math. There's something refreshing about going to my next class.
Yeah, new faces.
That they're in their room, or they're at in their desk, or wherever they are, that
mm-hmm.
they're staying there.
Yeah.
So if I've been doing my best to try to encourage them. Like, all right, hey, it's great out. It's nice outside. Let's get out, move, go outside.
Yeah,
10-minute walk, right?
But do they? It's
I don't
hard
know.
to say.
I mean, a lot of them have come back with some positive feedback about it. Like, I do feel better.
Okay.
I just took a walk, or I just rode my bike, and I think that's
a good thing.
That's a good thing.
But there's no actual break. So if they're remotely learning, they're learning from like a regular school day, sort of,
right,
as much as possible. So there really isn't, besides their lunch period, there's no big break for them. It's just a lot different sitting there in front of a screen than sitting in your class.
No doubt.
So it would almost seem like they could use like a little wider window, but yet you don't want to lose them either and give them too wide of a window to.
Yeah, I think, I don't have a solution, so I think about different ways that the schedule could work, but I don't know. I don't know if it would be better or worse. I think there's a lot of different ways they could have, administration could have tried to come up with something, and in conjunction with the teachers that were part of this committee, and it seemed like they wanted to be able to create consistency, and they have. And so there is a consistent schedule. Now that we're in the hybrid model, it's still consistent, and I think consistency is good in a chaotic time.
Yeah.
But who knows what it could have been if we went to a block schedule, or if we went to, all right, 1 week, this 50% of the student population is going to be in the building this week. The next week they're going to be off, and the other half is going to come in. And it's an opportunity to get really creative and kind of jumble up the traditional system, and maybe let things stick that worked from that.
Right. Well, how long will this schedule be in force? When does it change again, or does it?
That's a great question. We're not sure. So I think soon, maybe the end of the month, they'll probably go to the 50% model. So we'll have 50% of the kids in. So you go to an A-B schedule at that point. I think it's Monday, Thursday, and then the Tuesday, Friday.
And everybody remote on Wednesdays just to clean the building.
Correct.
Or whatever. Yeah. Are they allowing any kind of extra time for teachers to try and plan? This seems so complicated. It seems like you need more time to plan all of this. Is there any kind of something for you guys?
Well, we had some institute days that were added in the beginning of the year. So we were able to plan what the remote experience would look like. The transition between the remote to the hybrid, there was no additional time to prep for that. There was no, we didn't get like, all right, we're gonna have Friday is gonna be an institute day and the kids are coming Mondays. We didn't get that.
Good.
It would have been helpful. Mm-hmm. But in the same sense, I almost feel like I wanted it now. Give me a week of it to try to wrestle with the challenges of it, and then give me Monday to try to talk with my colleagues. Like, all right, you had a week of this, I had a week of this. Where are you at? How can we make this better? So I don't know if the time would have been used as well on the front end, because we just didn't know what to expect.
That's absolutely true. And it changes so often.
Right.
I've been working with granddaughters on their 2 days a week on they're all fully remote right now. And just the fact that, I'm there, especially with the kindergartner, and I'm kind of sitting there with her less and less as time goes on, because she needs to kind of do it by herself and she's learning. Mm-hmm. But just having this constant monitoring of the teacher. I mean, I feel sort of bad. I feel like I'm kind of like, the third wheel or the fifth wheel or whatever, where, you have a gigantic audience now. And I think that's got to be a little bit difficult to get used to too. And a lot of home things happening that you might be hearing or seeing that,
right,
normally you wouldn't.
It's, I feel like I've been doing this for 14 years. So I feel pretty comfortable being on display of whoever's watching. I feel confident in that. I feel like if this was my first 5 years, I would have a lot of anxiety about the idea that a parent walking through the classroom could listen in on what we're doing
every minute.
And I've had those conversations with my student teacher, and she seems to be pretty comfortable with it. But she also hasn't gotten into the content that is really tough to talk about, right? Sophomore English, you start reading To Kill a Mockingbird. We start to pose some of these social issues, the racial questions, and how that gets discussed. And your 22-year-old college kid trying to cultivate those conversations and that dialogue, with somebody listening in, that's hard. That is a challenge, and that's coming for her, and that's going to be difficult for sure. So I think it's more difficult, depending on the content that you're trying to discuss. If parents were listening in, I think there's something that, not to kind of be dramatic, but there is something sacred about the classroom space where you can kind of get in there and, all right, this is it. Our door's shut. We're having this conversation, and we're going to be a little bit vulnerable here, and we're going to maybe say something stupid, but we're in it together.
Right.
Where that goes away for sure. And then even in the elementary schools, my kids are young, and they're in grammar school, and it's almost like, other parents are also maybe judging your kid and how they're acting, and like, I don't know. That's a little bit like, you gotta give grace to everyone, I feel like, at this point.
You do, and I feel like most people are feeling that way, that, hey, this is all new to everybody, including teachers, and teacher aides are all working. Unfortunately, one of my granddaughters' teacher has been out a lot, so there's all these subs coming in.
Right.
I can't imagine being a sub trying to figure this all out, but
I know.
The aides are helping her, and it's, you just got to say, they're doing the best they can under the circumstances. So I mean, those are big challenges, and I mean, I would think, and I think from what you've stated, the biggest challenge is not having that personal experience with your students. I mean, if you're a teacher, that's what you do. You connect with kids, and when you can't really do that, that's got to be really frustrating.
It is, and it's exhausting because you're trying to find those little opportunities, those nuggets where you can kind of tap into right at the beginning of the class and make a mention of something, and it's just not the same. It's like I find myself like I'm like taking notes on, if I see something on social media, like a kid did something, I'm like writing it down so I like make sure that I say it, where I never did that in the past because I just did. Like, the kid comes in, it like triggers your memory. And you're, hey, I saw you hit a home run yesterday. Great. That part of it is really hard because they're not walking into your class. It's like you log in and then there's the Brady Bunch of 27 kids in front of you, and you're just trying to manage getting started and
keep them engaged and wanting to learn and do it and all of that stuff. It really is hard. I guess. Has there been anything that you can find that's a plus out of all this, or is there really just not?
Well, I think when there's an experience that's really challenging, and this has been challenging, sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to find the positive sides. I think a couple of years from now, and we're looking back, and things are a little bit more traditional, maybe there will be some kind of some calluses on your hand. Like, hey, I learned this thing, and this is where it was, and we got through that, and this is, we can handle it now. We can handle anything. I'm hoping maybe there's some of that. I do think it reinforces a lot of what I believe, in that the relationship part is so important, and making sure that you're really just taking note of like those missed opportunities where you had a chance to connect and you didn't, and making sure that you do it. And I think that has been definitely reinforced, in terms of the way that I want to approach my classes and my students. And I also think, there is an essentialism ingredient to this thing now, where, I'm looking back at some of my old assignments and I'm thinking like, all right, well, is the 3-paragraph analysis necessary? Probably not. I could probably measure what they know if they just do 1 or if they just do 2. And so cutting some things down, making the workload less for them, because they're on a computer for 6 hours a day and then they've got 2 hours of homework. It's too much. It's too long. It's not healthy for anybody. It's not sustainable. So I think really, really targeting like, what are the essential things? If I had, a chapter in a book and I have 3 essential items that I want to get from it, maybe that 3 gets pared down to 1. And maybe some of those takeaways will, make me better, in the future, and give the kids a better experience. And then I'm actually evaluating them, better on the 1 thing instead of a little bit of a messier evaluation on the 3 things. So I think some of that might help, and that's what what I'm really working towards in terms of the content part of it.
I can see that.
But it's definitely reinforced the importance of the human connection in teaching. that it matters. It really, really matters. And the kids want it. They crave it. And I think about my own kids. Like, what is the one thing that I want for my kids in school? Of course, like, you want your kid to do well academically. You want them to excel, but ultimately you want an adult who is not their parents to take an interest in them, to know them, and to care about them. You want that. That's what you crave for your own kids. We're trying to provide that in a setting that's really challenging to do right now. So I think that's part of, what is so tough about this setting.
I know from, my little grandchildren again, I mean, they desperately, and they're little, but they desperately want to be in school because they want that connection. They want to see their friends too, and they really miss them, but they really want that teacher connection.
Right.
And I think that just your point of, I think sometimes too when you have older kids, you don't realize how important your connection is to that older kid. And this is really showing you that it is
no doubt
really important.
It's just so many little, high school kids, it's similar in the elementary school, but high school kids will tell you the craziest things, like on their way out of class, right? Or that couple minutes, like when, you kind of wrapped up the lesson and kids are kind of packing up and they're just telling you, like,
stuff.
Yeah, you're like, okay, well,
wow.
Yeah. And like, they obviously want to get it off their chest, and they want to tell somebody, and you want to be there to hear it. And that just, those nuggets are gone right now.
Yeah, and they're not going to say it in a whole, they're not going to do it.
No. No way.
That's kind of essential. I know none of us know what the future holds, when things will get back to whatever normal is, but given that they're doing these phasing programs or phasing in, if it goes well and they don't get, cases where people have to be quarantined or whatever, will they keep going to try and make it where they have a full schedule at some point?
It seems like that's the plan.
That's the goal.
Eventually that can happen. I don't know if that happens in this school year.
Yeah.
But time will tell. I'm not sure. Is it dependent on a vaccine? Probably.
I think so.
Is it dependent on cases being at a really, really low level in the area? I'm sure that's part of what the conversations are. But I don't know.
Quick question from me. You hear on the news, kids, especially high school kids, are not going to wear their masks, they're not going to be socially distanced, and that's a big concern. But do you find, I know you have a small group at this point, but do you find that kids are trying to do the proper thing because they are concerned about the health issues, like they do wear a mask, or they think they're like a little bit, they it wouldn't be a problem for them?
I think a lot of teachers were worried about that.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily worried about it. I think a lot of teachers were. The kids have, if anything, I think the way you tap into a teenager who feels invincible is like, it's just not about you. It's about me, right? So I need you to protect me. And I think
that's good.
and I haven't had a situation where a kid has tried to take his mask off or, pull the mask down. I haven't had that circumstance, but that's kind of the angle how I addressed it with my classes before they were coming in. I was like, listen, here's the thing. This might not hurt me. I'm relatively young, but what about my father, my mom? They're going to be taking care of my own kids if they're getting them to school or watching them after school or whatever the case may be. Like, I need that to be a situation where we can have that. I need you to respect me enough to do that. And
and they're good that way.
Kids are, for sure. I think when you level with kids in that way, I think they will step up and meet the challenge for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a great way to put it for them. Anything else before we go that you'd like our viewers to know about education so they can understand? And I think be patient. that's the thing. I sympathize so much with teachers and kids right now, and I hope everybody does. But are there any other thoughts you have?
I think the teachers are working really hard, and there's a lot of teachers that will tell you this is the hardest they've ever worked. It's tough right now, and I think that's okay. I don't think teachers need sympathy. I just think grace and patience.
Yeah,
that's
grace and patience. That is it. And that's what I hear from nearly everyone. And I hope that people do feel that way because everyone's doing the best that they can do to kind of get through this step by step. And you learn something, you go back a step, you go forward 2 steps, and so on. So. Well, George, thank you so much for coming in and kind of clarifying some of this for our viewers.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think when you're not there, or maybe you don't have kids at home doing it, or grandchildren or whatever, you don't realize the challenges that are on the end and how they're being addressed, and really well. So thanks for coming in.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm Sue Jankowski, and this has been Spotlight Issues. Bye-bye.